Well, we know it's top of mind for a lot of people right now. It's property tax amendment, and we're soon going to have Representative Toby Overdorf on to talk about property taxes. But voters, in November, they're going to have to decide whether or not they want this property tax exemption. He's was the leading proponent of it on the House floor.
A man with the plan on your taxes.
Yeah, and it's we talked to County Administrator, Palm Beach County Administrator Joe Abruzzo about this issue, and he talked about the consequences there could be for Palm Beach County and other counties and local governments around the state as a result of this.
And now we're going to hear from Toby Overdorf says, hey, we need it, and now's the time.
But is he right?
Well, and ultimately, as you are fond of saying, and accurately so, so trite to say, but if voters approve this, and it will need 60% approval or better by voters for it to happen in November. But if it happens, then I guess we're going to get that answer, because we'll all be the petri dish. We'll all be the test lab for the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5, or beyond, or in perpetuity, see if it matters. But Brian, it comes down to ultimately, people feel like they just can't get out from under the affordability crisis. And fundamentally what we're hearing is that Republicans have either, A, if you support it, said they're listening to the voter and saying, we're going to help you out. We're going to make sure your property taxes are cut if you so approve. And opponents are saying, oh, you didn't want to deal with tougher issues like property insurance, so now you're going to dump it on localities by selling fool's gold here. And that's going to be the debate, what it'll ultimately mean. But I can certainly see, because you and I hear about it all the time, people say, I just cannot take one more bill. And,
right.
And the argument is, you own your home, why you have to pay taxes, why are you paying such such big taxes on it for such a long time?
They're paying high property taxes, they're paying high property insurance. Right now, groceries and gas are high, and for a lot of people, especially people on fixed incomes, you give them a reason to decrease significantly their property taxes, they're going to grab it. So increasingly, the odds of this getting the 60% vote that it needs in November to become law seems increasingly likely. It may not succeed, because 60% is still a pretty high threshold, but if it does, it's going to be interesting in the years to come what happens. And, Joe Abruzzo offered us his point of view on how these things happen, and Toby Overdorf will offer his point of view on how it's going to happen, because he was, as I said, the leading proponent on the House floor.
Representative
amendment.
Yeah, from the Treasure Coast. And Brian, in all the years covering politics, we've both covered a lot of big issues, and you were up on the beat in Tallahassee for many years. Anything bigger in terms of how it'll change the face of services and everything else? Pro or con? I mean, people are going to decide that, but anything bigger that you've ever seen come down the pike?
Absolutely one of the biggest issues we've ever faced. And it's big, but on the surface it's simple. Because we're just asking the voters, you want a tax cut? Not many people are going to say no to a tax cut, right? I mean, when you put it as, as simple as that, do you want a tax cut? Sure. The consequences of the tax cut, we'll find out. If this bill passes, if this amendment passes, we'll find out fairly quickly during 2027 what the consequences will be. One of the things people are talking about is that smaller cities and towns may have to stop being, fold and pass on all of their needs to their county governments, which then absorbs more that they have to do. So I think there may be some unintended consequences, but we'll find out.
Well, one note is that this is why Top of Mind Florida exists. We're hearing from people who are saying this is going to be a huge and negative impact, and we want to make sure that our viewers and listeners hear the other perspective from somebody who's been in the legislature, raising his own family in Florida, pays his own property taxes, so it's not like he's flying in from Pluto here. Toby Overdorf from the Treasure Coast, who says, here's a different part of the story you need to hear. And then for the next few months, you and I will be parsing all of that, and we'll all be getting bombarded with commercials. And ultimately, again, it'll be where it always ends up, necessarily so, with all of Florida weighing in November. But
So our thoughtful conversation is coming up.
yeah, that's right. Representative Overdorf, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
You are the man with the tax plan. I mean, you certainly helped push through this legislation that will allow voters to decide in November, do I want to cut effectively my property taxes with drastically heightened homestead exemptions. Boil it down in plain English. What might it mean? I've read numbers like if this passes, it can mean $1,500 to $1,800 average savings for a homeowner. What are we talking about to what it can mean to people's pockets first?
Absolutely. As you may recall, that property taxes basically come down to the assessed value, and then the assessed value is basically what is out there as what your property is worth according to the property appraiser on the assessment, and then the assessments are degraded per se to your taxable value utilizing the homestead taxes, the homestead items. So right now we're looking at a homestead exemption of $125,000 that would start on January 1st of 2027. That would be added to the current $25,000 exemption. So meaning you have a $150,000 exemption. That is taken off of your assessed value so that your taxable value is $150,000 less. On January of 2028, that increases to $250,000 off of your assessed value. So basically, what does that mean for the average person out there? Well, remember those two sides of the equation. One is your taxable value. The other side is millage. If we go ahead with this and maintain the current millage, the average person will save anywhere between $1,400 and as much as $3,000. And I say that because many folks are also inside of a municipality. The municipalities are able to charge up to 10 mills. A county can charge up to 10 mills, and the school board can charge up to 10 mills. On top of that, you also have water management district. You have other smaller special assessment districts that could potentially add on to that as well. So there's a possibility that you could be paying on the mills, but if, again, the mills are maintained as they are, the average person would save anywhere between $1,500 and as much as $3,000 is what we're calculating.
Every year, I mean, if I'm sitting there hearing this, I'm like, hot dog, let's go. But there's more to that story. So,
well, and I want to emphasize also that this savings is not necessarily for that person that is a beachside property owner or somebody who is a waterfront property owner, $1 million, $2 million mansions. These are for that working family that is really set up out there. These are that mom and dad that have a couple of kids at home that every dollar counts right now, and they've saved to get into this house. Now they want to be able to make sure that they can make the payments. They can go ahead with the other things. I mean, you think about what even $2,000 could do for a family that has 2 kids or 3 kids at home. It's a lot. So that's really what we're looking for is those families and seeing how we might be able to help them.
right.
But won't that be offset by the increase in property insurance?
The increase in property insurance?
The
I'm so
ongoing,
glad you brought
never-ending
that up.
increase in property
So
insurance.
currently we've seen that property insurance in Florida has increased by the lowest amount in all of the United States, 0.54%. Is actually what the increase has been for the state of Florida. Now, does that offset the historic increases of property insurance? You have to remember that those historic increases are associated with the property values that have gone up. Those property values have skyrocketed. We saw in roughly 2019, the average home across the state of Florida was about $230,000. By 2022, it was $420,000 was the average single-family home price. So when you look at replacement value, repair costs, everything else, that's really why you saw your property insurance go up. But also you combine that with the previous litigious items that we had, the high tort costs and everything else, we're now seeing that go down. So no, I don't see it being offset with an increase in property insurance. I think that the property insurance has leveled off. And I mean, just now you've seen even USAA gave a huge over $1 billion back to their their insurancees, I don't know how else to say it, here in the state of Florida, and the folks that have USAA. And so that is, I think, one of the items that we're seeing over and over again. So while property insurance has been historically a thing, I think we're seeing that level out.
Insurancees, I got to write that one down.
Of course, we're one major hurricane from that changing.
You could say that, but we have the structures now where we're seeing that the overall the reinsurance costs are down as a result of some investments that we've made here in the state of Florida. We also see that overall the rates per thousand are going down.
What you're hearing, and we had recently, Palm Beach County Administrator Joe Abruzzo was in, and he and other county administrators and municipalities are saying, you're cutting us off at the knees. Our budgets are going to be hit, I've heard the word catastrophically from some, and from a range of services, and they just say, despite the way it's been pitched by some, that also is going to include hits to public safety, and there was not nearly enough thought going into what localities are going to do. It was state legislators saying, we're going to make a decision from on high, then you all get to pick up the pieces, and it's going to have a profound impact on services. That's what they're saying. How do you respond?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I want to make perfectly clear that this was not a proposal that was put forth by the Florida House, my compatriots, and or the Florida Senate. The proposal that was brought forward in special session was a proposal done by the governor's office. The Florida House actually had very minimal input into this process. Additionally, we understand that, we had proposed previously a complete exoneration, a complete removal of homestead property taxes. That was not taken up in any way. When the proposal came to us also, it also included school taxes at the time. We took out the provision for any homestead against school taxes. So now you are going to be paying your full school taxes. That was taken out of this provision. We also modified some other minor tweaks associated with it. However, that being said, this really is the governor's house resolution. We passed it off of the floor. And right now we're looking at, number one, in local government, we're seeing that just in the last several years, $18 billion, you talk about property insurance, here's an opportunity where we've seen $18 billion of increase in property taxes just over the last 3 years. The projection is another $12 to $15 billion over the next 3 years. Where does it end? And I think this draws a line in the sand and says, look, we are going to step back. This brings us back to basically 2022 levels of property tax revenue coming in. This, in my opinion, local government will have opportunities to gain revenue. In fact, there is a publication that's put out by the state. It's almost 312 pages long and lists all the different ways that local government can actually raise revenue for a variety of things. Well, they may go to a fee base, they may go to other things along those lines, instead to provide the same services that we have today. Do I think that local government may also look at the other side of the equation from the taxable value and say, all right, well, we need to increase mills? I absolutely do. And I think that is a caution that we as legislators need to review and take a look at. We had ways that we were going to be dealing with that, but that wasn't taken up during this special session.
You had been the author, just before we go on, you'd been the author of a lot of the House push. You're saying this was separate from that. It may have taken some elements from that, but this has the governor's fingerprints and signature all over it. It wasn't precisely what you were helping author and push from the House side.
I would say that's an accurate statement, and we never had a provision for residency and that type of thing, and we did not have a provision that was the $250,000 except where it came for with the homeowner insurance. And that was a $200,000
I just
provision.
want to clarify that. Go ahead, buddy.
It seems a little, you're saying this was the governor's idea. Well, and the role of the legislature is not just to accept the governor's idea. The role of the legislature is to examine it, study it, decide what works and what doesn't work. I watched the House committee hearings and the Senate committee hearings, and the floor, there was very little discussion among Republicans. Democrats spoke up, but this thing was passed in a minute. Why?
Why was it passed in a minute?
Well, why,
Primarily
I mean, if
because
you're blaming the governor, essentially, you're saying this is the governor's bill. Well, your job as a legislator is to not just do whatever the governor says, right?
So what we believe in the Florida House is that ultimately, as you are aware, that this decision will come down to the public. And there is a requirement for 60% associated with this. Also, as Republicans, we believe that the fiduciary responsibility is to put money back in the pockets of Floridians. We believe that this plan does that. We also need to make sure that in the future, we're not handcuffing ourselves as far as whether it be the schools and the issues there, or whether it be local government. We sincerely and truly believe, number one, we're going to have about a $4 billion haircut per se in the first year, and it could go to about $8.8 billion. Now, Mr. Abruzzo, and I respect him greatly, and he is a very good administrator, let me say that, as is Mr. Landry up in St. Lucie and others across the way, across your viewing area. They have a very difficult job to do, and that is to put that money back in the pockets of Floridians, but still provide those services. So yes, we did have those discussions, and I will applaud my compatriots across the aisle because they gave a fair amount of good questions. One of those questions also allowed us to look at, there was a trust fund that was potentially going to be set up. That trust fund would have been about anywhere between $8 billion to $12 billion. And then local governments could petition that trust fund. Well, number one, the state doesn't have an extra $8 to $12 billion to put into a trust fund that would be able to fund these local governments that may have had a shortfall. Second of all, I would predict that we would find that there are a tremendous amount of winners and losers associated with the trust fund. If you've got a great lobbyist, if you've got good relationships with the state of Florida, maybe your municipality would get a little bit more money. I don't think that's fair, and our compatriots didn't think that was fair. We wanted to make sure that we put this back to those administrators back in those municipalities instead.
What about the argument that, listen, we're talking about millage rates, you can do that locally. We're talking about fees, you can do that locally. And people like Mr. Abruzzo and others say, this isn't a tax cut, it's a tax shift. The only difference is state lawmakers decided to dump it all on us to make the hard choices that they, in our opinion, have not done nearly enough, to your point, to analyze before they did this. It effectively, the last moment of, so to speak, of Ron DeSantis' time in office.
Well, I would say is that unfortunately our local municipalities haven't made the hard decisions. The state is absolutely calling on local government to make those hard decisions, which they have not done over the last 6 or 8 or 10 years to decrease their budgets. They have not done rollback rates. I mean, again, in one of our committee hearings, I asked all of our committee members, 35 members that sit on the property tax committee, who here has had a rollback, a true rollback, meaning coming back to the taxes of that year, or has seen a decrease in property tax. Over that time, of the 411 municipalities and 67 counties, a total of 5 have done that in any given year over that 5-year span. I don't think that's right, and we haven't seen this happen. So maybe there is a forced reset being done as a result of this proposal.
Do you, Belle Glade, for example, and some other small communities in the Treasure Coast, there are very few houses in Belle Glade that sell for over $250,000. Most sell for less than that. So that wipes out their tax base. The city might have to stop being a city, and the county would be forced to take over. Joe Abruzzo suggested, I think he said it was up to a dozen communities in Palm Beach County might have to dissolve. I'm sure maybe an equal number in the Treasure Coast. What's the impact of that?
That is something that we're continuing to look at and to understand. You also need to understand that there are about statewide, the average is about 35% of all properties are homestead properties. 65% are not. And that was why there's another provision within this that we decreased the amount of assessment increases to non-homestead properties from 10% to 5% on an annual basis. That was an item that did come out of our committee, and we requested that did happen. However, the other element of that, which was we didn't want it to happen until every 3 years. In other words, they wouldn't have that increase. That unfortunately was not adopted by this resolution. But I'm encouraged by that. What I'm worried about, and I will say this publicly, is that those folks that are the non-homestead could potentially bear a large amount of the burden if local government chooses to do that. And if local government chooses to put this on the backs of businesses and put this on the backs of those that have a second home here, that's a possibility.
But the local administrators are arguing that the decisions that have been made in Tallahassee are going to force us to do it. Joe Abruzzo said we're looking at a $250 million cut in our budget. He said no amount of sitting and talking and calculating changes the fact that we're looking at a huge hit. And it's interesting, Florida Tax Watch made your point. They're saying Florida property tax system will already shift billions in property taxes, or will, from homesteaded to non-homesteaded. He makes the point. He said, but you're going to end up potentially, I don't want to put words in his mouth, others giving us no choice. The Wall Street Journal, no liberal outlet they, called it a, quote, progressive pitch that could lead to a graduated property tax system. So even conservatives and groups, attuned to business and all of that are saying, we didn't bake enough thinking into this. What do you say to those critiques? I know you've seen them. What do you say?
I think that a fair amount of this is going to be coming out over the next several months. And, as I've seen some of the polling, whether it be from James Madison Institute or others, this has not hit 60% at this point in time. Mm-hmm. The proposals are somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. So there needs to be, if this is to pass, there needs to be a group that says we really want to get this done, we really want to get out there, and we really want to be in a position to pass these two. I will remind your viewers as well that over the last several years, there were other homestead property exemptions that were put to the ballot. Most recently, $100,000 exemption, I believe it was, for firefighters, teachers, et cetera. That did not pass. 2 years prior to that, there was a $125,000 exemption as well. That did not pass. So at this point in time, in order for this to pass, we need to get to 60%, and we will see if that actually happens as we roll forward.
This may be a good point to bring up because obviously you've been a big supporter of his campaign, Byron Donalds, who has a massive war chest right now. We'll see what happens in November. We can talk a little bit more about that. But he's basically said, even if voters don't approve it, I'm going to effectively ignore that. I'll go, there's something, the Florida Taxation and Budget Reform Commission. He said, one way or the other, we're going to get these cuts. So we're saying, let the voters decide, but even if they do and I don't like it and I'm elected governor, I'm going to do an in-run around them to make sure it happens.
Well, I want to be clear is that the Taxation and Budget Commission was established prior to 2007 by the Florida legislature, and it is an independent committee per se that is made up of appointees from the governor's office, from the House, from the Senate, and these are all there have to be private individuals, not part of the legislature. Then there are 4 members of the legislature that are placed on that as well, and 2 members from the House from opposite parties and 2 members from the Senate from opposite parties. This would then formulate a variety of tax plans. This doesn't just look at property tax. This looks at every other tax and fee that is out there in the state and formulates various constitutional amendments that may come forward and or gives recommendations to the legislature for various bills that may in fact come forward that don't need a constitutional amendment. So this is something that was long ago put into place and is not part of the quote-unquote Byron Donalds platform that he is then orchestrating. Now, will he have some input in it? Absolutely, when and if he is governor, and frankly, I hope that he is. That being said, I think that we will see some proposals coming out of that, and we will see some opportunities there for whether it be taxes, fees, spending, et cetera. They're going to be looked at. And again, this is a committee that was formulated many years ago and approved to be part of the constitutional process.
So you're home now. You're not in Tallahassee. What kind of feedback are you getting from your communities?
So it is varied. There's a lot of folks out there that want to make sure that they get a little bit of money in their pockets. They ask about the process that it's going to go through. How can I be supportive? There are others that are within local government or within others that are asking, all right, so how do I pay for this? So if this in fact does go through, what are we going to be doing? So the same questions that you're asking me right now are the questions that I'm getting out there in the public. And I think it's something that we're going to continue to have those conversations, continue to have those questions, albeit, again, I'll be traveling around the state answering questions associated with this. And one of the other questions I get is, so tell me again about the residency requirement. And, that's something that I think needs to be explained a little bit better as well.
Yeah, I've been joking that over the next few months, millions of people are going to flock to Florida to move in, because if they wait till after January 1st, they'll, for 5 years, have this only a $50,000 exemption.
I'm having them all move right next door to Brian. He's going to have a new barbecue pit. I happen to know that because I don't live far west.
And
So they're gonna live next door to him.
and just for your viewers, so they're aware,
how's that?
if in fact you purchase a home or have purchased a home prior to January 1 of 2027, you are considered a Florida homestead person. You've homesteaded as of January 1 of 2028. So you are now eligible to have the $150,000 and the $250,000 homestead exemption right off the bat. If you wait until January 2nd of 2028 and you purchase your first home ever in the state of Florida as a homesteader, you are now in a 5-year waiting period.
I thought it started 2027.
I thought.
2027, excuse me, I
Oh,
apologize.
okay.
Yes, I apologize.
Do that math again, because
So
it is important.
once again, so if you purchase a home on January 2nd, 2027, and that's your very first home, your very first homestead, you will now have a 5-year waiting period until you will qualify for the $250,000 exemption. So there's a variety of folks out there that have questioned that provision itself, and I know that there is currently at least one court challenge. I've heard about some others that may be coming forward, and there may be some court challenges that have happened by the time this broadcast airs. We'll see
What was the
happens.
thinking behind that?
Well, the governor, like what we just talked about here, he did not want this flock and this invasion to come here just to take advantage of the tax break. So as a result, his thought was, all right, we're going to add in a, quote, residency requirement that's associated with this, so that it would prohibit somebody moving here and the next day taking advantage of the large homestead exemption. So again, this is something that we're going to have to take a look at, and I think that the courts are going to take a look at that provision as well. And
Are you comfortable with that provision?
We had looked at different types of provisions for if you had been here for say 10 or 15 years, reducing your taxable amount. And I was told at that time that is not constitutional and that we would not be allowed to do that. So I did not receive any questions from the opposing party about this specific provision and whatsoever. I'm not a constitutional attorney, and I'm just I'm an environmental scientist and work in an engineering company. So I think I will leave that question to those constitutional attorneys.
Just that. And state lawmaker and helping boost campaign. I want to be clear. You talked earlier. You made it very clear. Governor's plan, but had it been your signature all over that, you wanted to go farther. You wanted to go farther than his plan. Am I reading? And you would have, if it was Toby Overdorf's plan, said what?
The Florida House advanced a
with you
property.
as one of the authors of it.
The Florida House advanced this. I was not the author of that specific one. Monique Miller was, and the Speaker of the House decided to bring that forward, so which we did. And that specific provision was a removal of all homestead. However, we had provisions in there, number one, for police and fire that needed to stay at the 2026 budget levels. Additionally, we did not include schools whatsoever on that. So we made additional provisions within that would have aided in making decisions on a local basis. Those same provisions are not within this specific proposal. And so we were trying to get some things across the finish line at the time. The Senate did not engage in any discussions whatsoever during the time in the legislature, our regular time, and it wasn't until the governor put forth this proposal that, in fact, we had some discussions at that point.
Seems like, to your earlier point, kind of a goofy, somewhat frenetic, some would argue disorganized way to deal with what many argue, you've argued too, covering the legislature so long, is going to be one of the most profound votes that people take in a long time, and that, because you didn't get those provisions in, will impact, administrators say, public safety. And it just seems rushed.
So the public safety side of it is certainly a concern that has come out right and left. You know, in St. Lucie County, we have a fire district there. It's one of the areas, and obviously the taxable value affects the fire district millage. So that is something that they are obviously very concerned about in that area there. We look at here in Palm Beach County, the single largest item that comes from ad valorem taxes is in fact the sheriff's budget. And I think that is a common theme that we're seeing throughout municipalities. That is that typically law enforcement is the single largest item that is affected by the various taxable revenues that come in. So that being said, I do believe that there's going to be some hard decisions also by the Florida Sheriff's Association and how they look at law enforcement, how we're looking at that from a small municipalities. Small municipalities decide that they want to have a boutique police department that provides additional services to their residents. And they're going to have to make decisions if that's something that they want to continue, or if in fact they're going to make an agreement with the sheriff's office and decide that. So I'll also be crystal clear in this that the original proposal that came to us said that there is very specific categories in which the property tax money could be spent on. The Florida House removed those provisions and said, no, you are going to have this as overall, the local government can make the decisions of where they're going to spend the revenue that they have. And we felt that that was more appropriate than the state legislature telling the municipalities and the counties how they can spend their property tax revenue.
On a slightly different topic, they're shutting down Alligator Alcatraz. I've seen various numbers on this, but one number that seems to come up fairly regularly is that the state's on the hook for about $1 billion. Maybe not, they'll get some federal money. But is that a financial concern that the legislature may have to look at in the not too distant future?
I think there are a fair amount of economic concerns that we need to look at. This year, the Florida legislature and specifically the Florida House made a stance and said we are going to decrease our budget because we believe that in the future we are not going to have the same amount of revenue. So we did not have a massive increase, even though our friends across the dais wanted to. In the Senate, they wanted to have an increase. We chose not to. We feel that there is a need for reserves. There's a need for an opportunity there. Yes, this is absolutely a concern to have that money refunded, hopefully by the federal government. I have obviously not been a part of those negotiations.
Right.
But that being said, it was certainly an item that was discussed while we were on the floor. Specifically, there was an item that gave the governor discretionary funding. And one of the provisions that we have in the budget is that there is discretionary funding, but only a certain amount of that up to January. And then after January, when the new governor takes over, there is an additional amount there.
Forgetting whether people are for or against Alligator Alley, financially, was it a good move for the state?
Was Alligator Alcatraz a good move? Again, I have not been able to open up those books and look how the money was spent. I think that the governor took it, and I say this not in a derogatory way. The governor took advantage of an area that provided a runway, provided an opportunity to get people out of the country, and felt that was an appropriate area to do that. Felt it was somewhat centralized to a large illegal immigrant population. I think that the enforcement has happened where that illegal immigrant population has decreased, and as a result, we're seeing that detaining facility shift, and we're seeing it go to a northern area and out of specifically the Alligator Alcatraz area.
Sure.
We're going to start to wrap it up, but we'd be remiss, obviously, Byron Donalds. From the very outset of our podcast, you talked about supporting his campaign. What's he got, about an $80 million
Yeah, he's doing okay.
war chest right now? But the truth is, average Floridians, I hate that there's no average person, but people generally don't follow politics the way we do. So what do they need to know about who Byron Donalds is, what he stands for as we start turning into the summer months here? And people will start really paying attention more than just us junkies
Yeah.
who read about it nonstop.
Sure. So the great thing about Mr. Donalds is when you talk with him, he will answer any question. And whether it be something from the past or something into the future, he will answer those questions. He'll keep eye contact. It's a rarity for a politician to be able to stand there and answer questions, to have everything on the table, and to be forthright about his past, his future, etc. Byron really started in very humble beginnings and literally was moving furniture on the weekends just to make sure that he could make ends meet when he had a young child at home. And he worked as a bank teller as well and worked his way up through that. I can't think of another gubernatorial candidate that has worked that hard in the private sector and learned how to be that worker, can relate to those people every day that are struggling for dollars with a couple kids at home. That's something that resonates with me. He was never on the government dole the entire time that he was in office or running for an office. Here's a guy who worked really hard for everything that he has. So I think that's a lot of what I have a lot of respect about. I worked with Byron when I was in, quote, my freshman term in the Florida House, and he was a sophomore at the time. And he was slated to be in leadership, and instead he ran for Congress, was able to get there, and here he is, less than a little over 2 years, and he's already getting votes for Speaker of the House. Here he is getting votes to become the third most powerful person in the entire country. That has to show something about his personality, about his ability to bring people together. There's 435 people up there, and they felt that he would be a good leader. That's amazing for somebody who's been there for 2 years when you have these folks that are there for 30 and 40 years and not getting votes.
Would you like to be his running mate?
Would I like to be his running mate? That is entirely and totally up to Byron.
I understand
And,
that. Would you accept if he asked?
It would be a long conversation with my wife. Put it that way.
Very long, but
Almost got you.
forward conversation.
And your grandchild.
That's right.
certainly.
His
Most
1-year-old.
certainly.
We could talk about our grandchildren all day. Let me ask, so November in many ways is going to be a referendum on President Trump, obviously, especially in the midterms congressional level, but, his imprints are and support for Byron Donalds is clear, and some will argue, since it will be a referendum on him and therefore him, what's this guy going to do for me? Is he just Trump light? Some in Florida will say, I love if he is. Others say, I don't need a version of Trump light here in Byron Donalds. What do you say?
I think that Byron is his own person. Always has been, always will be. His policies are really Florida-centric, and looking at ways that we can make Florida continue to be the best education state, that our students are going to be prepared for the future, that industry is going to take off and continue to be in a spot where we have an opportunity now in the state of Florida to take off, and no pun intended, with the space industry, where we're going to be seeing well over 1,000 launches every single year happening here. That technology is going to take off. We're seeing other high-tech facilities pour into the state of Florida based on our education, based on the availability of services, whether it be rail, whether it be high-speed internet, whether it be other items that are here. We're also looking at turning around how we have power generation. One of the things that I've been working on behind the scenes with his team is looking at small modular nuclear. Mm-hmm. This is a revolutionary way that we can now potentially provide power without having thousands of acres dedicated to solar or thousands of acres dedicated to other.
Or data centers taking up mainline power.
Most certainly, and therefore also having that additional power that keeps those costs low. Believe it or not, the state of Florida has some of the lowest energy costs in the entire country, and I'd like to continue to keep it that way.
We're going to have to wrap here. Since we didn't get you on the running mate question, could you at least tell him that we'd love to ask him some forthright questions? Would love to have him on our podcast this summer as we really gear up. And I have a feeling he could pick up the phone and at least put in a request
Sure,
for us.
of course he could.
A request for us.
Could.
We'll compare grandson notes
Sounds great.
later. Any final thoughts, sir?
I
Sorry
just
you're
so
not busy
appreciate-
this summer.
Yeah, I so appreciate the time to be here and to also talk to your watchers and listeners out there. And it's certainly a pleasure every time. And happy to come back if you have additional questions or comments and things that you feel I might be able to answer.
I will say you've never, ever ducked or said no to an interview or not asking questions, tough or otherwise. And we'll do a whole segment on grandsons later, but we do appreciate that.
Thank
so.
you. Well,
Final
Ida
thought?
Beckham.
Well, thank you for being here. We've had the pro side on the property tax amendment. We had Joe Abruzzo, who you can also watch.
Who's a great guy and I
listen to,
very much respect. Yes.
who has an opposing view on the amendment. So lots of information. Enjoy.